Good morning and welcome to Glendale City Church. Good to see you all here today. Hope you've had a blessed week, and we have sunshine today again. Must be Southern California. Please note in your bulletins that next week will be the Day of Remembrance. If you have any loved ones who have passed away recently, please feel free to give me their names, and we will read their names next week when we normally do that, as we do once a year. Other than that, I think most of the announcements you will find in your bulletin, so you can follow along in that. Please, as many of you as are able, to stand where you are and join me in the call to worship, and remain standing for the opening hymn. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. Praise the Lord, O my soul.
Good morning. Leif is saying, Beth, what are you doing? You know how Leif often comes up here and says, well, I have a surprise. Leif, we have a surprise for you. October is Pastor Appreciation Month, and we have 3 who are pastoring for us that I would like to invite you to appreciate. I think almost every one of you got a card or 2 or 3 that looks like this. And I just invite you to write a note to any or all of the pastors that we have here. That includes you, Pastor Leif, and also Pastor Greg Nelson and Pastor Johnny Ramirez Johnson, who I don't think is here with us today. So I would just like to make a couple comments about what I appreciate about each of you. So Johnny brings to us sensitivity to diversity. He brings us effervescence. He also brings us intelligence and academically informed sermons, which I really appreciate. Pastor Leif, I have often referred to you as the glue of our pastoral staff. You're probably the first one to arrive on campus every Sabbath, and also probably the last one. That means he does everything in between. He not only discusses issues with the security guards and gets the bulletin done and teaches Sabbath school and preaches, and basically all this unseen stuff that makes church happen is thanks to you, Leif. So we thank you. Also, Greg, we're delighted that you are ministering to us. What many of you don't know is he lives in Grass Valley. He has to drive an hour to the Sacramento airport and then wait for a plane, get on it, and fly down to Burbank, and then drive to Schultz's house for about 24 hours. So it's a big disruption in your weekly cycle, but you make it for us, and you seem to be joyful about it, which makes us joyful. We just want to say we appreciate the fact that you take an interest in each one of us here. And we also appreciate your sermons that not only blend spiritual truths, but also help us to integrate that into our daily lives. And behind each of these men are partners who are incredibly supportive, and I don't want to ignore those as well. Clara helps Johnny. She brings us food. She brings us smiles. She gives us texts to encourage, and she brings children to Sabbath school. Taylor plays the organ and gets you here on time and is truly a moral support for Leif. And we've only had the pleasure of meeting Shasta once, or at least I have, and she clearly is supporting, given it's a big sacrifice for her to let you leave her every weekend. So we thank these partners as well. So I invite you to participate in worship in part by writing notes, and then when the offering is collected, you can just put your note in the offering receiver or give it to me, and then I'll be bundling those up with a package for each pastor, tying a pretty ribbon around our notes. And if any of you are missing a note, I have just a few left, and you can raise your hand and I'll bring you one. Okay, now.
Wow, what a lead-in. You know what? I'm just going to ask you to say hello, and then I'll say something right before prayer. Please, greet each other. This place is amazing. We'll come back for prayer. good when the song ends early. That means we've had a lot to say to each other. I just want to mention, after what Beth said, just the appreciation to Leif, to Johnny, to Greg. I'm always honored and humbled to just come up here. And I get to be in the bulletin with Greg now. I've been with many, many pastors here. And what an honor. What an honor. So thank you. Let's pray. Dear Lord, what a blessing that this space is, that the people that are here are, and we just pray for anybody and all that are watching. We're so amazed that we get to share this with people that aren't even sitting in the pews with us today. So I don't even know how to thank all of that, but bless all of you. Thank you so much for this place, Lord. Thank you for the blessings that have come, that are still to come. Be with anybody and everybody that needs your special grace, your compassion, all those things that help us get to tomorrow. And thank you, Lord, for once again this church and all those that help provide what we do here. In your name, amen.
The scripture today is from the Message Bible, Matthew 7, verses 9 through 11. Please join me when we get to the bold print. Don't bargain with God. Be direct. Ask for what you need. This isn't a cat and mouse hide and seek game we're in. If your child asks for bread, do you trick him with sawdust? If he asks for fish, do you scare him with a live snake on his plate? As bad as you are, you wouldn't think of such a thing. You're at least decent to your own children. So don't you think the God who conceived you in love will be even better?
Good morning, everyone. To those of you who are in this beautiful sanctuary this morning, and for those of you who are in the beauty of wherever your environment is, if you're looking in live streaming, we welcome you too. It was actually kind of nice last Sabbath. I mentioned to the people in the live streaming, use the chat and tell us where you're from. And we got some great responses from people all over the world. We have people watching us from England. We have people from all over this country. And it's amazing. That's Glendale City Church's extensive extended family everywhere. So we welcome you today, those of you who are watching, and thank you for being here, well, the rest of you, in this beautiful sanctuary. I just love this sanctuary. I think it is spectacular. I love the wood. I love this organ. I love Kemp. Man, he is the man. That is a great gift that he does. And I just want to say, Beth, thank you for for what you said about the pastors here. I would not have expected to be included in that amazing group, but I appreciate that. And I know that all of you know that being a pastor is almost like a 24/7 experience. And if there was anyone I would want to be working with me, if I had to say, it would be this man. He is a gift, totally. And I just want to thank Leif for who he is and how he works and what he does. Man, I mean, this church is going because this guy is running the whole thing. So thank you for that. Well, here we are. I'm going to be bold and talk about trust. Wow. But here's the way I want to start it. Some of you have seen perhaps this clip, but let's take a look. And if the sound is up loud enough, then we're going to hear this thing. And if you can't hear it, you can certainly watch it, and it'll tell you exactly what we're doing here. All right, you ready for this? Here we go. You've seen this? Okay, we got the sound, but we don't have the picture. Let me try something. No? Gotta love it. Okay, ready? Go. Poor Chris, man, he's running up and down from the AV booth to downstairs. But we don't have the, we just don't have the moving picture. Remember those good days of the moving pictures? Classic. So this clip, after the movie came out, I don't know how many years ago, but Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This is the number 3 of the 3 that were made by Harrison Ford. And this clip is from the 3rd one, The Last Crusade. And so it got so famous, this particular scene, they named it. And you try to guess what the title of this clip is. Here we go. Should I hit it? You okay, Chris? Okay, so far so good. Now this thing, can you hit it? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to tell you what the name of it is while we're waiting to see it, and you'll see why it's called this. A Leap of Faith. Leap of Faith. That's what this is about. So let's see if it comes through here. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we don't have to. If it won't work, don't worry, Chris. I will describe it with the limited words that I can come up with, so you can see this in your mind. Okay, let's just do that. So here's the deal. I won't tell you the whole context of the story, but this scene is really intriguing to me. And whenever I think of the issue of trust, I think of this segment. So the primary character is Harrison Ford, and he is working to find something that's going to help his dad, who's been wounded and is in the other part of the cave. They're in this massive cave. So he has to get across this chasm. The problem of this thing is he comes to the edge and looks down, and there's this massive chasm. He has to be on the other side to get the medicine that's going to save his dad. Now, they're all archaeologists. So he comes up to the edge, and he has this booklet that's giving him directions on how to find this whole thing, and he's reading this, and his father is in another thing, a part of the cave, but he's shouting out loud to his son, just believe, just believe, just believe. So Harrison Ford looks at this booklet and says, okay, it's telling me I just have to step out. So the big scene here is he lifts his leg up like this, And that foot is going over a bottomless chasm, and he puts his foot down, and guess what? There's a path that goes all the way across. So he steps on that, and it's narrow, and he's walking along, and finally he realizes, hey, this is a real deal. This thing is going to work. So he balances himself all the way across, gets to the other side, and just so that he can see it on the way back, he throws some sand on it, and suddenly it appears. So what he realized is that here's the crossover. So I've watched this so many times through the years, this particular scene especially, and I wonder, so what does this mean? What does this say about trust? Well, one thing it says to me is trust is not easy. Let's just face it right now. I mean, the reality is that as human beings living in the kind of world that we live in, it is not easy. Almost everyone I talk to, whether it's on a spiritual level or just a life level, trust is very difficult. Here's one of the slides, one of the quotes. David Brooks, I mentioned him last Sabbath in his book, How to Know a Person. He says, today's social breakdown manifests as a crisis of distrust. Now just hold that for a second. The social breakdown is a manifestation of a crisis of distrust. 2 generations ago, roughly 60% of Americans said that most people can be trusted. 60%. 2 generations ago. By 2014, according to General Social Survey, only 30.3% did, and only 19% of millennials. So you see the generational drop that's happening here with trust. Now let me show you a couple of slides from the Pew research. This is the latest research that Pew has done. And look at the top here. Americans are worried about the declining level of trust citizens have in each other. And look at that first line. It goes 79% Americans have far too little or too little confidence in each other. Isn't that interesting? America's low trust in each other makes it harder to solve the country's problems. 70% of the people. Americans' level of trust in each other has been shrinking. 64% say that. It's a very important, the level of confidence Americans have in each other be improved, 58%. And then this is the clincher. America's level of confidence in each other is a very big problem, 25%. So just hold that for a second. What does that say to you about the possibility of trust in this world? I have no idea how that impacts you. I know how it impacts me. Trust for some of us comes easy. Trust for others of us doesn't come easy. Some of us are born skeptics. The needle can go to that side for me very easily, depending on what I'm experiencing at the time. So let's look at one more here. Those who think interpersonal trust has declined cite social ills, personal behavior, and government problems among the reasons. Look at this. 71% of adults believe Americans are less confident in each other than they were 20 years ago. 71%. 7 out of 10 people that you see downtown and even here say, you know what, we're less confident in each other than before. But notice the top 3 things here about why they say this is. 14% people are more isolated, lonely, out for themselves. Now that's a truism, isn't it? Man, I see it all over. More isolated, and this is where my wife comes in so powerfully because her expertise is about what it takes to experience belongingness in order to put a dent in the loneliness, the sense of isolation that we have in this country. It is at an epidemic high, loneliness, which is isolation. So if we're lonely, if we're isolated, how much trust can we develop inside ourselves? It's very hard, isn't it? So we're in an epidemic, I think, of a lack of trust. I mean, look at all the lack of trust in our culture. There's distrust in institutions, correct? There's distrust in leaders, yes. There's distrust in politics, yes. There's distrust in religion, yes. There is a breakdown in trust in our relationships, yes. So what does that leave? Well, it leaves ourselves. And yet, self-awareness is at a low in our, according to our research, is in a low in our country. So that means we're not even trusting ourselves. We're not finding the ability to look at ourselves and say, you know what, I can do this, or it's going to be okay. We have a hard time saying that, many of us. Very little trust. So if I were to ask you a reflection question, how would you respond to this one? What's the area of your life these days that you have a difficult time trusting? Is there any part of your life where trusting is difficult in that part? I bet we all have something like that, right? There were times in my life where I wasn't sure where in the world God was. I'm not ashamed to say that because that's part of the human journey for a lot of us. But I kept asking, so God, when I first moved to San Francisco, of course, I'd gone through a major crisis, and I said, wow, I mean, seriously, where are you, God? I have no idea if anyone in this room has ever had a statement like that, but there are a lot of us. A lot of us that say, where in the world is God? Now that's a tricky question because it makes you wonder, how do we see the evidence? I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But all of this is to say that it doesn't matter who you are. There are moments where you struggle with the idea of the experience of expressing trust in what you want to do or who you want to do it with. So I want to talk about a story that is just classic on this topic. It's an Old Testament story. Many of you have heard it perhaps. Others of us, maybe this will be the first time, but let me start it this way. This story shows three types of trust choices. This is the story of the Israelites. They have spent 40 plus years wandering in the desert after they were freed from Egypt and their slavery in Egypt. So now they've been on the peninsula, the Sinai Peninsula. They've been going for 40 years, which means that over that course of time, a whole new generation is now coming to the Jordan River. The Jordan River is the one obstacle to the Promised Land. So they get to this river, and they're wondering how in the world, this is of course harvest time, and the water is overflowing the banks on both sides. So God says to Joshua, I want you to bring the people together, and I want you to put the priests in front. They're carrying the Ark of the Covenant, which is the symbol, the object that symbolizes God's presence. So we've got 4 priests carrying this thing. And the direction is to the priests, I want you to take the ark, walk right up to the edge of the water, and when I give the sound, when I give the, I want you to step into the water. Now that's an interesting thing. I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, if you were one of the priests and you're carrying this sacred symbol and you're being told nothing is going to happen until you step in, what is that behavior called? Trust. So God is basically saying to these priests, you have to trust. It's just like Harrison Ford. He had to step out and then step down for that path to appear. Well, the same thing is going to happen here, but they have no evidence that it's going to happen. Remember that this is a new generation that did not go through this separation of the waters in the Red Sea. Those people have died off in the wandering. Now we have a whole new generation here, and they have not seen it. There's no evidence that something spectacular is going to happen to get them to the other side. They don't see any boats in the water. And it's overflowing with the rapids and currents. When there's no evidence, how do you trust? That's a choice that some of us have. Here's a second possibility of choice. He says to the priests, the moment you step in the water, something will happen. They step in the water. They decide to go through with this thing. I mean, after all, they're carrying the symbol of God. So if God's saying, put your feet in the water, and you have no idea what's going to happen, they said, we got to do it. So they do. The moment they step in, the water separates. And in fact, the water is high as it separates, and it goes quite a ways upriver, and then the other side goes downriver a bit, and it leaves this dirt path all the way across the river. Now, this is an interesting story, isn't it? Have you ever had that happen to you? Well, so the priests on the first one, they had no evidence of it, but they followed through, bam, there it goes, and now there's a dry path. So the second is, God says to them, I want you to take the Ark of the Covenant and stand in the middle of the river in the dry path. So they're standing there while one by one and tens by tens, all the thousands of Israelites walk through all the way to the other side. Now, if you were one of those people, you were not the priest, but you were just one of the people, a part of the tribe, how would you feel as you walk across? Well, I'd tell you what I would do. I'd be looking at the water as I walk along. And the moment I see a change in that water, man, I'm going to hightail it to the other side if I can make it. Well, what would you do if you'd been there? Well, some of us would say, wow, is this the coolest thing? We've never seen this before. This is fantastic. Wow. Others would say, man, this is scary. So everyone crosses. But guess who has to stay there? These four priests. Bless their hearts. They're standing there in the middle of the path, and they watch the group go and get to the other side, and they still have to stay there. When you're waiting in the middle and afraid of what could still happen. I don't know if you'd be one of those priests. I think I would have. I mean, I saw something miraculous happen, but how long is it going to last? God never said, man, you got 15 minutes. So watch the sun here and be sure to move quickly, because when the water's coming down, good luck. That's not what God said, but I would feel like it. So when you're waiting in the middle, what is the middle that you've had to wait in your life? You've started something, but you're not quite sure what's going to happen for you to get to the other side, whatever that might be. Does that resonate at all? I think that there are a lot of us who go in the middle ground. We have the courage to step in to the water, so we go to the middle, but we're needing to hang around there for a while as we sort of acclimate ourselves and then figure out the next steps, before we go to the other side, I'm wondering what can still happen to me in the middle ground. Boy, that's what these people had. I'd rather be the regular people in the tribe that just hightail it across, man. They're safe on the other side. These guys are still standing with the water on both sides. Here's the third. So to make it even more painful for the priests, potentially, God says through Joshua that there needs to be one man from each of the 12 tribes, and they are to go out to the middle where the priests are on that dry ground, pick up the largest stone they each can get, and march back to the new bank of the promised land, and we're going to build an altar. Well, I don't know about you, man, but I would as one of those 12, I'd go, you've got to be kidding me. We're going back in there? I mean, how much time do we have? In the meantime, the priests are still standing there, and they're saying, what are these guys waiting for, man? I mean, we can't wait here forever. The water's going to drop sometime. When you go back to the waters because you have more work to do, what happens then? Boy, I resonate with that one. Go back to the water? Come on, man. Even though it's, they're split here, what's going to happen next? What does God have in mind? Have you ever asked that question? What does God have in mind here in my life? I can't figure it out. God, what would you say? That's the whole challenge with this trust thing. And we wonder why in this culture there's a drop in trust, because there's so much suffering and pain in this world happening. And we wonder, where in the world is God? We feel like the waters have already caved in. So we're saying to ourselves, man, I mean, there's more work to do? I mean, wow, what's that going to mean for me? The story is fascinating to me for these three reasons we've looked at. And if you had to identify one of these trust choices of these three, which one would you resonate with the most? Might be different for all of us, but think about that just for a moment. Which one? We got 3 when you go back to the waters. We got 2 when you're in the middle and afraid of what might happen. And number 1, these are the guys that started all. When there's no evidence, what do I do? It's an interesting choice that you and I are faced with all the time. We have to make a decision. Will I trust or will I run away? So we come to the section of building a trust in this environment. Let's look at this. I love the text here. Notice this. There's 3 kinds of trust choices. At the bottom, God did it before to others. God can do it again for me. Look what he says here to the Israelites. He says, yes, God, your God, dried up the Jordan's waters for you until you had crossed, just as God, your God, did at the Red Sea, which had dried up before us until we had crossed. So this is an interesting statement they're making. God is making a statement for the people who didn't know about the Red Sea, that it had ever happened, unless they heard stories from the tribes. This is a new generation. And so God, through Joshua, gives them the full picture. Hey, God did this before with the Red Sea. And the Israelites escaped from Egypt and their slavery. God can do it again. He's going to do it here. And you saw it happen before your eyes. That's an interesting choice to make for trust. God did it before to others. God can do it again for me. The question is, will I believe that enough to act on it? Fascinating. So this is the second part of God's speech. This was so that everybody on earth would recognize how strong God's rescuing hand is. God's rescue hand is strong. What does that make you feel like? If you actually believed that, would it change the way you dealt with trust? God's rescue hand is strong. And then third, the text says, and so that you would hold God in solemn trust always. Give God your trust and see. For some of us, we're willing to actually frame it in a way that says, okay, I'm going to experiment with this thing. I don't know if it's going to work. But what happens if I give my trust and see? There's an interesting mantra that my wife Shasta and I have used over and over again, and that is here to as a prayer to God. God, here is what I want. It's not bad, right? Tell God what you want. But the ending is really significant to both of us. God, this is what we want, but if you have something better, we'll surrender to that. That's fascinating. I have found in my experience that the something better happens often. The something better. It would have been different had I chosen my choice, but God had something better, and I surrendered to it. I put my trust as much as I could in it, and it ended up better. Well, that's not to say that happens for all of us, right? It's a very slippery issue when we talk about trust in God, especially. Because we think God is this omnipotent power, sort of ready to give us anything we want, and what we want we think is always the best. But that last line is a game changer. But if you have something better for me, and even if I don't understand how better it is, I am going to surrender my trust to you. Richard Rohr, many of you know him and read his books. This one I particularly enjoyed, Following Upward, A Spirituality for the Two Halves of Life. Very, very good. And he talks about this issue of trust, and he very transparently and honestly talks about the difficulty that we have as humans to understand how God works through this whole global process. We don't really know. So here's the way he lands. And in the second half of his life, he says, you know what? God has shown that God is love. I've seen it in others. I've seen it in me. And though that might not explain everything, because there's a lot of things we cannot know about God, I would prefer this decision than not. That's interesting. Let's think about that as we get ready to come to an end here. This is interesting to me. Dr. Pillay, who is a Harvard Medical School professor, clinical professor, his emphasis is on imaging, brain imaging research. He says some really interesting things about fear and faith. Let's see, I guess that didn't show up. Okay, that's all right. We'll look at this. Living a life of trust or fear. So that's what those pictures are. Fear at the top, trust at the bottom. Here's what he says. He says, trust is one of the essential ingredients in human attachment. It is vulnerable to a variety of factors, but one of the key challenges to trust is fear. All right, that makes sense to me. Fear controls the extent to which the gates of our emotions and thoughts are open to others. Okay? Secured attachment, which is an attachment that involves trust, is really about losing the fear of intimacy or the fear of disappointment. And here's what he goes on to say. He says, you cannot have both emotions at the same time. You either have one or the other. Which would say to me, if we want to manage trust and fear, then we choose trust. Because while you have that trust, the fear is not as strong. It's not in the same languaging that Richard Rohr puts, but he's essentially saying that. Richard Rohr is saying, I'm choosing belief and our faith and trust. So that the fears of me not being able to explain all the specificities of the universe, including what's happening in this crazy globe that we live in, I'm not choosing that, I'm choosing the other. And that, Dr. Pillay, the psychiatrist, says, is the way to minimize that fear. Make a choice. I mean, let's face it, some of us are never going to be smart enough to try to understand every single piece of who God is and how God operates. And Jesus, I think, actually deals with this, and that's the next couple of slides here. I love this text. We read it for the scripture reading. If your children asks for bread, which of you would give them a stone? Can you imagine this parent taking away the spoon, putting a stone on it, and then giving it to the child? It's hard to even imagine. Or if your children ask for a fish, would you give them a snake? Who would do this? Even though you make huge mistakes as parents, you still know how to give good gifts to your children. And then here's the how much more. How much more your heavenly parent will give good things to those who ask. Now, there's enough for those of us who are skeptics in that final statement to just sort of sit there and say, well, you see? I mean, good things. What is good? Well, it seems like all the suffering in Israel and Gaza is not good. So what do you do with that? Richard Rohr quotes this text and he says, you know what? That's true. There is a lot of suffering in this world. And yet, when all the research comes in about what it takes to have a life of fulfillment and peace and joy, it always comes back to the choices we choose to make, whether it's trust or love or joy or gratitude. Does that mean we ignore the pain and suffering of the world? Of course not. God uses us as instruments to give joy and peace to people who are hungering for it, to serve people who are in pain and suffering and anxiety. We are the hands of God to give that sense of trust to others. And this, Jesus says, is the real picture of God. It's interesting, when I grew up in Japan, and every summer all the missionaries of all the denominations went up to a lake in the mountains called Lake Nojiri, and the Adventists had their camp, and I was very proud of my folks because they bought a cabin up right in the middle of all the other denominations. I think back on that and I go, you go, Mom and Dad. They had that courage. So we're up there meeting all kinds of other people. In fact, I'll just say this real quickly. I started my pastoring in Spokane, Washington. I went to the Ministerial Association, all the pastors of all the denominations gathering. And so they opened it up saying, let's just go around the circle and tell us who you are and where you come from and all this. So it's my turn, and I say, well, I was born and raised in Japan, and my first 17 years were there, and then I came here, and blah, blah, blah. There's an older pastor on the other side of the table, and he says, after I finished, he looks at me and he goes, excuse me, Greg, but are your parents Paul and Barbara Nelson? I said, well, how in the world, are you a psychic? How did you know that? He said, well, I was up in Lake Nojiri with my family, and I met your parents. They lived right among us. Oh, I loved your parents, he said. I just like blown away. This is Spokane, Washington, man. And what are the odds of that? So it's so interesting. One of my memories is that when my sister, she's like 2 years and 9 months younger than I am, and Dwight, my older brother, is 2 years and 9 months. I don't know how Mom did that one, but it was interesting. So I remember this of my younger sister. She's this young toddler, and what Dad used to do with her is, after she grew up to 2, 3 years old, he would be in the water, she would be standing on the edge of the pier, and Dad would say, come to me, come to me. It's okay, sweetheart, I will catch you, it's all right. You can jump. And it was, he had his hands like a few inches from her. So she jumped, landed right in his hands, his arms, and he would love on her, and then the next day she'd do the same thing, he would love on her. And I think to myself on this text, I mean, if we can do this as human beings, parents who are as human as they get, why would it be hard to understand that God wouldn't do the same thing? That's Jesus' whole point here. Yeah, I don't know what it feels like for you, what your trust issue might be with God or with others, but we have an opportunity as real human beings that we go up and down on our emotions. Sometimes we can trust and other times we can't, and that's okay. But guess what we really want in the midst of all that? We want this. We want community where we belong and we feel the belongingness from each other. I have several different groups that I meet with as a part of the group, and I told you about my best friends. Those are included. And I have to tell you that it is that human interaction where we can share anything, our fears and so forth. I just said in my mastermind group last week, I said, you know what? I'm having a hard time trusting. So tell me, what do you see? What should I see when I look in the mirror? Man, that group was just so loving and so caring, and they're all smart, and they're all coaches and therapists, and they understand, and they give me this courage. They help me see the mirror clearly, and then give me the, let's go here next. That's the way we deal with the questions. Why couldn't we say to each other in this group, you know, I don't know, God has been really iffy with me the last few years, or a lot of years, and I don't know what to do about that. Wouldn't it be great to be in a group where it was completely safe to say that? We get into the problem with church is that everyone is expected to be perfect. So we never say anything about what we're struggling with, but that, in my view, is the solution to the things we do not understand about God. God uses other people to help us at least see through in the middle of the water. We can go to the other side because we have a surrounding family that gets us and believes in us. And they say to you and me, it's okay. It's okay. We see you, we get you, and you can do it. And we're here to support you every step of the way. I'm signing up for that church. That's the way God has meant it to be. He's not going to do everything. He's up there saying to himself, why would I do everything when I made people down here who have the capacity to love and give each other things? Wow. That's what I want. That's the kind of person I want to be to others. Trusting is not easy. All the research shows how hard it is and the depth of distrust. But we can do it. We can do it. There are people who love us and want to help us on this journey as we want to help them on their journey. Wouldn't you want to just make a commitment today to say, yes, I want to be that person. I want people in my life who will love me and help me on this journey so that my trust level can go up, my fear level can go down, and I can experience much more gratitude and hope and peace. Let's be that. What do you think? Just one notice. I'm going to play a song that's a fitting here. It's in number 50 in the hymnal. You know it. Many of you know it. Abide with me. It's a great message on this talk. Holy God, we have been here in your presence. We want to see you as a faithful parent, as Jesus mentioned. A parent that we can trust, a parent who will love us no matter what, who will be with us, who will believe in us. So thank you for your promise, and today we do the best we can in putting our trust in you, knowing that you will love us all the way through. So thank you for that. And may we as a community support each other, love each other, and encourage each other. And we will give thanks. In your name, amen.